Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Pipes, and today I'm reading Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Since you're here, I'm guessing you probably want to know more, so I'll tell you about the first 3 chapters, for a start. To Kill a Mockingbird is surprisingly not a how-to guide for murdering songbirds. Sorry, cats of the world. Instead, it's an iconic coming-of-age tale that takes place in a small southern town in the 1930s. For something that sounds so sweet and simple, this story gets real deep, real quick. It delves into the difficult issues of gender, race, class, and identity, as they're seen through the naive eyes of a young white girl. While the story is fictional or not true, it is based on realistic things that really did go on in small towns across the United States. And if you don't believe me, just ask your granny. Harper Lee wrote and published this novel right at the height of the Civil Rights Movement, making a powerful statement in favor of equality. Let's start off by talking about our main characters. First, there's the Finch family. No, Cooper, I'm obviously not talking about the birds. I'm talking about Scout Jem and their father, Atticus. Thank you. Scout Finch, whose real name is Jean Louise, is narrating the book as an adult, but she's looking back on her childhood, and our story begins when she's almost 6 years old. Scout's very smart, but also short-tempered and likely to start up a fight, which is precisely not what nice young ladies in the 1930s are supposed to be doing. Scout's older brother is Jem, or Jeremy, and he's almost 10 at the start of the book. He's more mature than his younger sister, and also more in control of his emotions. Well, most of the time. He's a real thinker, so he struggles with the hypocrisy and illogical behavior of his small town, and he dreams of following in his father's footsteps and becoming a lawyer. Speaking of his father, Atticus Finch is basically the perfect human. He's a kind, compassionate, brave, humble, and intelligent widower. When Shakespeare said, "Let's kill all the lawyers," he definitely was not talking about this guy. Calpurnia is the Finch family's African-American housekeeper, and for the most part, she's treated like a member of the family. She is a strict but loving mother figure for the children, and a symbol of strong womanhood for Scout. Calpurnia also serves as a link between the children's sheltered, whitewashed world and the harsh realities of life for Black Southerners. Charles Baker Harris is inexplicably called Dill. Yeah, that's right, like a pickle. No idea. Anyway, he is the going-on 7-year-old friend of Scout and Jem, who stays at their neighbor's house each summer. He's a mischievous dreamer and storyteller. Fun fact, Dill was based on the author's real-life childhood friend, Truman Capote, who went on to write In Cold Blood and Breakfast at Tiffany's. Miss Maudie Atkinson is a motherly neighbor and friend of the family, who grew up with Atticus. She's smart-mouthed, quick-witted, and obsessed with gardening. Miss Stephanie Crawford is the town gossip who lives across the street from the Finches. She loves to stir up drama and spread rumors, so you definitely can't always trust what she says. Finally, there's Arthur Radley, who lives down the road, but he's better known as Boo Radley since he's so mysterious, mainly because he never comes out of his house. Ooh. Now, before we delve right in, we've got to get awkward and uncomfortable for a minute. It's important to know that the terms Negro and colored are used throughout the story, because at the time in which the story is set, those were the generally accepted terms for Black Americans. Times change, and so does language. So while nowadays those terms aren't used a whole lot, or are often not used very kindly, they were pretty normal back then. The story also uses the N-word several times, and just like nowadays, that term was not meant as okay. It was supposed to be demeaning and derogatory. In fact, the white characters who use that term are clearly ignorant and racist, or they don't know any better, like children. But when those children learn better, they do better, and that's a lesson we should all remember. Okay, that's done for now, and we can move on to the plot. The book starts with Scout telling us that we're going to hear the story of how her brother Jem broke his arm. I guess it's gonna take, 31 chapters to get there. Anyway, first we're introduced to the Finch family. Done and done. We also learn just how small their small town really is and how everyone knows everyone else. It seems perfect and picturesque, despite the rampant poverty of the Great Depression. With ladies dolled up in pastel dresses, horses trotting down the road, and everyone sitting out on their front porches as the sun sets each evening. All you need is a cold glass of sweet tea, darling. Soon, Scout and Jem meet Dill, who is spending the summer with his aunt, Rachel, who just happens to be Scout and Jem's next-door neighbor. He reveals that he doesn't have a father and seems embarrassed, which confuses our young narrator, who apparently has never met a single mother before. The three become fast friends, and they like to act out stories together. Eventually, though, Dill gets bored, so he asks about Boo Radley, the neighborhood shut-in. Jem tells us all about Boo. Spooky story time. Jem says that Boo Radley likes to come out at night and spy on the neighbors and eat squirrels and cats. He's 6 feet tall with a scar across his face and red hands because he can't wash the blood off them. He also tells Dill that when Arthur was a teenager, he got in trouble because he went on a joyride with a few friends. Woo! As punishment, the other boys were sent to a boarding school. They ended up getting great educations and becoming successful adults. Boo's family, on the other hand, refused to send him there. Instead, his dad locked him away in the house. He wasn't seen again until 15 years later, when he stabbed his dad in the leg with a pair of scissors. Okay, crazy town. But then again, he's been trapped inside for 15 years. I've been quarantined for like 15 weeks, and I'm already going a little stir-crazy. The townspeople thought Arthur Radley should go to an asylum, but his dad said he wasn't crazy and just continued to keep him shut away inside. When Arthur's dad died, his brother, Nathan, came to live with him, but Boo still never came outside. Dill becomes fascinated by Boo Radley and wants to make him come out, and he even dares Jem to touch the house, which he eventually does. After Jem runs away, Scout thinks she sees a shutter move, as if someone had been watching. Dun dun dun! In Chapter 2, Dill goes home to Mississippi, and Scout goes to school for the first time. She's super excited! Until the brand new teacher, Miss Caroline, makes her feel guilty for already knowing how to read and write. In fact, she tells Scout to have her father stop teaching her because it will interfere with her learning. Not sure how that works, but okay. When it's time for lunch, which they call dinner, by the way, Miss Caroline offers a quarter to a student named Walter Cunningham so he can buy something to eat, since he didn't bring a lunch. Scout knows that Walter's family is very poor, so poor that they had to pay Atticus with turnips and nuts in the past, but that they do their best, and they never accept anything that they can't pay back. So, when Walter won't take Miss Caroline's money, Scout tries, and fails, to explain why. Miss Caroline gets confused and annoyed and slaps Scout on the hand with a ruler. Ah, what a perfect way to foster a lifelong love of learning. In Chapter 3, Scout starts to beat up Walter Cunningham, since she blames him for getting her in trouble. But Jem stops her and invites Walter home for lunch. When Walter pours molasses on his meal, Scout is horrified and points it out, which embarrasses him. Calpurnia then calls Scout into the kitchen and says that's not how people should treat their company. But Scout says that he's not real company because he's just a Cunningham. Rude. Anyway, this really ticks off Calpurnia, who explains that anyone who sets foot in the house is company, and it doesn't matter what family they come from. When Scout returns to school, Miss Caroline soon gets distracted and terrified in the middle of a lesson when a bug crawls out of the hair of Burris Ewell, a member of the poorest and least respectable family in town. When Miss Caroline asks him to clean himself up a bit before he comes back to school tomorrow, his classmates explain that the Ewell kids only come to school on the first day because they're forced to, and then they don't come back for the rest of the year. and Burris seems proud of this. Burris then leaves, but not before yelling at Miss Caroline, calling her a snot-nosed slut of a school teacher, and making sure he brought her to tears. Wow, what a nice guy. When Scout gets home, Atticus can tell she's upset, and she tries to convince him that she shouldn't have to go back to school, since the Yules don't go to school. Atticus explains that the town kind of bends the rules for the Yules, since they won't change their ways. For example, since their alcoholic father spends all of his welfare money on booze, the town lets him hunt out of season, even though it's illegal, because at least then the children will have something to eat. And if that isn't freaking sad, I don't know what is. Atticus then explains that the rules don't bend for Scout, so she has to go to school. But he promises that they will still read together every night. Aw, what a good dad. This is a coming-of-age story, so it's all about the children learning important moral lessons, or in literary terms, themes, as they grow up and mature. However, the first few chapters of most books are really just used for exposition. We're introduced to the main characters and the setting, and eventually the underlying conflict, and that's usually where we first start to see evidence of the themes. It's pretty clear early on that prejudice has taken hold of this town, which relates to multiple themes, beginning with assumptions. Now, some of the assumptions are so deeply embedded in Maycomb's culture that the children just see them as normal. Scout mentions at the very start of the book that the name Haverford was synonymous with jackass in their town. Sorry, parents. Those are the author's words, not mine. Anyway, it's obvious to Scout what kind of people all of the Haverfords are just because they come from that family. All Haverfords are donkeys, or at least that's what everyone assumes. Then, when the first graders meet Miss Caroline, they're apprehensive about her because she's from North Alabama, which is full of people who are different from them. At the same time, Miss Caroline doesn't see the apparent poverty right in front of her and assumes that the small boy with no shoes can just afford to pay her back, no problem. So both the students and the teacher are making assumptions about each other. The children also make wild assumptions about Boo Radley. Despite having never seen him, Jem goes into detail about his monstrous physical appearance and murderous eating habits. And these childhood legends are accepted as simple facts. Ultimately, Atticus says it best when he tells Scout, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." Okay, so I know he sounds a little like a creepy murderer in that second half, but he's trying to say that there's a lot more to people than where they were born, what family they're part of, or what they look like, and you need to make an effort to see that. The need for compassion is also seen in these early chapters, and the first loving, compassionate character I'd like to talk about is Calpurnia. While Scout first describes Calpurnia as a tyrannical presence, and Calpurnia does give her a good spanking when Scout insults Walter, she's also the one who taught Scout cursive. And when Scout returns from school, Calpurnia kisses her, tells her she missed her, and made her favorite snack. There's a lot more to Calpurnia than Scout sees at first. She's clearly a motherly figure who disciplines and encourages, scolds, and loves. On the other hand, Atticus seems a bit more distant at first glance. In fact, the kids even call him Atticus rather than Dad or Papa or whatever your favorite name for your father is. Scout says he treats her and Jem with courteous detachment. However, I don't want you getting the wrong idea. It's not that he is detached or that he doesn't love and care for his children. Quite the opposite. He treats his children like young adults. He calls them by their first names, so they've learned to do the same. He treats them courteously, rather than barging in on their privacy, and they've learned that same respect. As a result, they love him more than anyone else. Overall, at the center of this story, we have a loving, compassionate family, which we'll soon see is a quality missing in a lot of other townsfolk. Finally, I'd like to talk about the first hints of social inequality in the story. And in these first chapters, it's all about the word just. Scout doesn't see Walter as company because he's just a Cunningham. She automatically looks down on Walter because he's from a poor family. She sees him as less than her. She's a Finch, but he's just a Cunningham. Where'd she learn this prejudice? Not from Atticus. In fact, Scout tells us that he and Walter talked happily about farm life like two adults. He didn't treat Walter any differently. Not from Jem either. He invited Walter over since he knew their fathers knew each other well. And certainly not from Calpurnia. She lectures Scout on the importance of treating everyone who enters the house with respect. Calpurnia even says that acting so rudely to a guest disgraces the better family that Scout seems to think she comes from. So, where did she pick up on this classism that rolls off her tongue so naturally? Well, I don't have a good answer for that, but I will point your attention back to the tale of the Haverfords. The whole town, she says, knew what their name was synonymous with. So it seems that maybe the whole town's views of the Cunninghams could have spread to her, too. As always, here on Piper's Paraphrases, I'd like to leave you with some food for thought. These are questions to consider as you look over and think about these chapters, and as you continue reading the rest of the story. First, in what ways is Maycomb relatable to you or to your town? Second, do you think your family has a reputation in your community? How might that reputation have affected you and your life? Third, how should Scout have been treated at school? Clearly, she's ahead of her classmates, so what could Miss Caroline have done to help her instead of hurting her? Fourth, based on Burris Ewell and the description of his family, what can you infer or guess about his home life? Why do you think he behaves so horribly? And finally, what do you think of the author's style? She blends the naive thoughts and experiences of a small child with her vocabulary and knowledge as an adult. Have you ever read any other stories with a similar voice? Thanks for watching this overview of chapters 1 through 3 of To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm Professor Pipes, and that's all for today. Go forth, read a bunch, and be good people.